The Islamist insurgents seized the city on August the 15th last year amidst little resistance as the West-backed government collapsed and the National Army surrendered in their thousands as Taliban rapidly took control. The anniversary is being marked against a worsening humanitarian crisis and continuing concerns about the rights of our women and girls. Our chief correspondent, John Cookson, has the story.
The Taliban marked the first anniversary of seizing power in Kabul with a national holiday. But the anniversary comes during a deepening economic and humanitarian crisis. These exceptionally brave women chant, "We want bread, work, freedom," at a rally 2 days ago. This was the Taliban's response. The stunning fall of Afghanistan back into the hands of the Taliban as the US and its allies ended their 20-year war led to dramatic scenes as Afghans tried to flee the country, some clinging to packed planes taking off from Kabul airport. Many fell to their deaths. It was America's most disastrous military withdrawal in US history, which in those dark days a year ago left 13 American troops and more than 170 Afghans dead. The establishment of the Islamic Emirate by the Taliban triggered an international response that has crippled the country. Development aid has stopped, foreign exchange reserves frozen, and sanctions were imposed. The result, this hospital in Helmand has been forced to close its doors to all except those suffering from cholera. 500 turned up, showing signs of a disease caused by a lack of basic sanitation, clean drinking water, and adequate sewerage systems. Despite assurances that schools would open for girls above the 6th grade, the Taliban have barred them from secondary education. Now girls and young women risk punishment for attending secret schools, which in many cases they don't even tell their family members about. For the Taliban, today marks their independence, the culmination of their insurgency against US-led international forces and the former government. Many other Afghans, however, are despondent about the direction the country is heading. John Cookson, Arise News.
And John Cookson joins us now for more. John, I want to say thank you very much for joining us here on Newsday. Now, talk to us. What's changed in Afghanistan in the last 1 year?
Hi guys, good to see you. Well, in the last year, the Taliban have consolidated their grip on power in Afghanistan. They're making billions out of heroin from the poppy fields of Afghanistan. And they're also benefiting from the millions of dollars worth of military equipment left behind by the Americans, all sorts of weaponry which they never had access to before. So basically every aspect of life now in Afghanistan is in the grip of the Taliban, who have this extreme vision of how the Muslim faith should be imposed on the people of Afghanistan. And before you say, well, hang on a minute, this is terrible, one thing I learned as a reporter in Afghanistan some years ago was that, in fact, a lot of the population, if you go outside of the big cities like Kabul, if you go outside and you go to different parts of the country, you realize that actually a sizable proportion of the people actually support this form of Islam. And that's one of the reasons why the Taliban can consolidate their grip on the country. And I think this is often lost in reporting out of Afghanistan. For example, I went to madrasas, schools in the south of Afghanistan, where it's seen as a great honor for a family to give up a boy, a son, to the madrasa aged 4. so that he becomes, enthused with the Islamic faith and become a Taliban fighter in later life. So there's a bigger picture here, but overall, the grip on power has increased, and I can't see an end to it anytime soon. There is a resistance movement in the north of the country, the National Afghan Resistance Movement, and they tried to seize the Panjshir Valley, but quickly got pushed out by the Taliban. But that's not to say that they're not still there. They are still there. But any hopes of them actually overthrowing the regime in Kabul are actually minimal at the moment. Guys?
So can we expect the Western community to lift sanctions at this time?
Not at this time, but at some point in the future, the impact of these sanctions on the way of life, on the people, the vast majority of people of Afghanistan, will become so severe that public opinion around the world would persuade, I think, Western governments to think again about lifting sanctions. You'll recall back between 1996 and 2001, when the Taliban were last in power, 3 countries, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, actually recognized the Taliban regime. And at some point, one of those countries possibly will be the first to break loose and to break this embargo that's on the Taliban regime at the moment. So the public opinion will at some point, because the suffering of the Afghanistan people will be so great, that the Western nations will have to consider lifting some of the sanctions to try to get some money into the country, some foreign investment, and most of all, vital aid, which is needed by the people of Afghanistan.
And it seems that the Afghani women are showing astonishing bravery. Will that last?
Unbelievably so, yes, absolutely. That was another thing that you suddenly realize as a stranger going to Afghanistan. The Afghan women are extremely strong. In the past, I've interviewed Afghan MPs, female MPs, doctors, lawyers, ministers, all of them. They have this inner strength, and that's never going to go away. It's in their genes. And will continue. And those brave women in the report that I put together earlier, I mean, unbelievably that they can go on the streets and ask for, to make some demands in face of gunfire from Taliban fighters. Quite remarkable and very, very strong, and it will continue.
All right, you say it will continue, but how do you see the future for Afghanistan as we speak?
Okay, well, more of the same for now. The Taliban will continue to take control because there is, frankly, no real opposition. The boycott and the embargoes will still continue by Western nations, and the Afghanistan people will continue to suffer. So I'm afraid, especially with winter approaching in a few months, things are going to get a lot worse for ordinary Afghans. But as I say, at some point in the future, this Taliban regime is and will be recognized by foreign countries, possibly, for example, Saudi Arabia being first out of the block. And that will cause a cascade of other nations, and hopefully vital aid will get in. It won't happen this year, maybe not next year, but certainly in the years ahead.
All right, senior correspondent John Cookson, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.